Have you had these questions? How do I intermittent fast with exercise? When is the best time to eat after I exercise? How do I add diet variation into my life so I can live my life as normal? All right, on this episode, we're going to answer all of these questions and so many more. Even how much protein should I ingest? And here's another one. If I'm not interested in putting muscle on, is resistive training something that I need? Well, you're going to learn not only is it something you need, but how it's the key to anti-aging. But I think more importantly on this episode is you're going to see a little bit more of how I live my life and the gentleman that I interview here. So really a lot of information, a lot of questions so many of you had on this episode of Cell TV. I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, CytoDefend. Look, at a time like this, I think that our immune system and keeping our immune system up right now is more important than ever. I can also tell you that I pay attention to the things that keep my immune system on par and healthy. So glad that CytoDefend is one of our sponsors here on Cell TV. And it's a product that I use, my family uses, and hopefully you'll check it out. And by the way, you can check it out with the link right here below. If you want to try a free bottle, you can actually get a free bottle, just pay the shipping. And I think you'll reorder after that, but check it out.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing CytoDefend product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit freeimmunity.com. Again, that's freeimmunity.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith, and today we welcome Siim Land, who is an author, public speaker, and biohacking coach. He has written several books about intermittent fasting, autophagy, ketosis, and resistance training. Today, he's here to talk about how fasting and muscle growth go hand in hand. There are a lot of common questions and concerns about this topic, and they will be addressed today. From finding that perfect balance of mTOR and autophagy to how much protein is too much, this is an interview you won't want to miss. So let's welcome Siim Land, who is joining us all the way from Estonia, and of course, Dr. Pompa, who's in Park City. Welcome, guys.
All right. Hey. Yeah, rarely do I get to interview somewhere where this time of year where it's colder where they are than it is where I am. Although you told me I have more snow, so that's I guess that's good. It's not as cold and I have more snow because snow can be fun. Well, listen, this is a topic that not many of us are talking about. I think that's how you and I connected, because we connect on this topic of, well, there's the groups, right? You have your vegan vegetarian group that hates this mTOR pathway, which if those of you who haven't watched shows, it's an anabolic pathway that can age you prematurely if you stay in it too long, which is true. And then you have the other side. You have your bodybuilders and workout people who hate autophagy because I'm going to lose muscle. However, you and I agree on that the balance between them is the key. So one of the things I want to talk about today is how do we do this? I mean, I talk about it in my book a lot. I even cite all the studies because I believe the key is going back and forth. And well, the topic today is how do we do this? What does that look like? How much protein? How do I work in resistive training to this? How many fasts, right? How much time do I spend with either increased protein or calories to stimulate mTOR? Anyway, this is a topic that really is, I think, something that everyone needs to learn in their life, because I believe we were genetically programmed for times of fast or famine, I should say, and times of feast, which is what stimulates this pathway called mTOR. Siim, what I just said may have confused some people, right? What the heck are we talking about? Let's start there. I mean, try to make it more simple than I just said.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's very common for people to, let's say, gravitate towards a certain idea in terms of when it comes to nutrition and diet. And a lot of the times it's just, people are, they get so good results by, changing up their diet every once in a while. Like, they quit the standard American diet, they go on a vegan diet and they see some massive improvements in their health. Or they go on a keto diet or something, and they see again they see improvements. So it's never that this magical diet is the best diet for everyone. It's the fact that they're changing their body's kind of nutritional environment or metabolic status towards a certain direction, and that is allowing their body to start healing itself and bring it back into balance. So you mentioned a few of these pathways that are constantly affecting this balance in your body, such as autophagy and mTOR. So let's say, for example, if your body is experiencing energy deprivation and starvation, then it's going to turn on this pathway called autophagy, or this process called autophagy. And when it's fed, when it's eating, it turns on the other side of the coin, which is mTOR. And mTOR is the kind of switch for growth and replication. So from an evolutionary perspective, or the perspective of survival, then your body can't really activate those things at the same time, because both of them require some resources, and the body tries to be as energy efficient as possible in order to survive. And that's why it has developed these different pathways and sensors for directing the energy towards one or the other. And the problem in the modern world is that we're never really experiencing, quote unquote, famine or starvation. We're always in this overly fed, abundant state. And like you mentioned earlier, if you're elevating mTOR all the time, you're being fed, overfed constantly, then you may just accelerate aging, and you will also predispose yourself to more disease and obesity. So that's why in this modern world, we have to kind of create these scenarios that kind of mimic starvation and mimic some periods of famine, so that we would kind of keep our body in this homeostatic balance, that we wouldn't overexpress the anabolism and mTOR.
Oh, yeah. In my book, I call it diet variation, feast, famine, cycling. You're right. I mean, we have to imitate what our bodies are genetically programmed to do. Because, look, when you look at whether you improve your muscle function or strength, your digestion, anything, your brain, it's the principle of adaptation, meaning we create a stress, and if we adapt, we get stronger. And we have to create the stresses. You and I were, right before we got on, we're talking about going from hot to cold, right? A sauna, out laying in the snow, and Ashley was like, you guys are nuts, but from hot to really freezing cold, what are we doing? We're creating a stress, and the adaptation improves your immune system. The adaptation improves your hormones. And, we're not doing anything different when we're changing the diet. When we're going from a pathway of autophagy to mTOR, we're doing the same thing as hot or cold. Literally, we're just causing the body to adapt. That's the principle that Siim and I are following here, and that's the principle that really it holds up under everything. It's really cool. I'm using this machine. It's called an Avicen, and the whole principle is it heats just part of your blood, and then your hypothalamus that senses your body temperature goes, only part of the blood is heated. I'm going to go into heat stroke. So what does it do? It opens up all of your capillaries and sends blood into every part of your body where it typically normally doesn't have a lot of blood flow. And it creates this massive healing in your body, all based on stressing the body, or at least getting the body to think it's stressed, and then create this amazing adaptation to where it sends blood out to cool the body, is what it's trying to do, save its life. All right, so let me back up a second. We'll tear this thing apart here for people, and I want people to realize, look, we're going to tell you how, to work out with this concept and how to put all these things together. How did you get into this, Siim? What's your following? You have a big YouTube following out there. How did you land here?
Well, I was just into like weightlifting back in high school, and at that time I was also very curious and did a lot of research about nutrition and diet just to optimize my results and improve my body composition and strength. So just over the course of years, I've learned about different diets like keto, paleo. I've done different versions of carbohydrate loading, intermittent fasting, extended fasting, and I also just started to broadcast those things into my blog. And from that time, it kind of gradually grew into a YouTube channel and a podcast, which we had you on a few weeks ago as well. So yeah, like I've been just become very almost like a self-experimenter who is researching about these things and sharing it with other people.
How many followers do you have? You have a big following.
Yeah, on YouTube I have like 95,000 subscribers or something, so we're close to 100,000. And on other these social media platforms, I also have on Instagram it's like 28,000, and the podcast itself also has like, I don't know, 10 to 20,000 followers. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been gradually growing over the course of
Yeah,
years.
that makes me happy because someone out there is speaking the right thing, which in this area, believe me, you have people line up in their camps, man. You have the keto campers, the paleo people. I just came up with that, keto campers, paleo people, actually. And then you have your vegan people and your vegetarian people, right? I mean, you have these people that line up on the autophagy side of things, and but yet how few are bringing it all together. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about it. I think we have a lot of listeners that are intermittent fasting, right? And we both know that intermittent fasting, a lot of people are gravitating even to one meal a day, which many days, right? One meal. But doing too much of even intermittent fasting can produce too much autophagy, and therefore too much of a catabolic state. It can lower immunity. So talk a little bit about that, and talk about how you have found to bring balance to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most common problem with fasting too frequently has to do with the thyroid, so to say, and your metabolic rate. So your thyroid is like very vulnerable to stress, and especially like adrenaline and cortisol, and those things are actually very elevated when you are fasting, because like you said, fasting is a stressor. It's a positive stressor, but like with anything that is good, too much of it can become bad. It can become bad. And if you fast, let's say, too often, too long, all the time, then you will inevitably downregulate your thyroid, and that can just slow down your metabolism. That can cause some other hormonal imbalances, and especially like weaken your immune system, so you may get sick. And the way I personally overcome this is I change things up. Like I personally eat on most days. I do eat one meal a day over the course of a few hours, but on some other days I just add an additional meal, and I eat 2 meals a day. So it just breaks the pattern, so to say, that allows my body to recover from the fasting and allows me to still keep making progress. So that's like an easy way of changing things up, and you can still do some form of fasting. And for other people, they may even have to include maybe 3 meals a day, depending on the situation. But the main idea is that you change it up a little bit. And you can also change things up with your diet. So, for example, I do think that eating somewhat of a low-carb diet that incorporates, healthy fats and plenty of protein is a good idea for most people, especially like the population that is insulin resistant, or they have some sort of metabolic syndrome.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, some carb cycling is also very beneficial, because of carbs especially are useful for boosting your thyroid and overcoming this slow metabolism, so to say. Those are actually more effective for overcoming metabolic adaptation and also breaking ketosis. So this kind of shift promotes this metabolic flexibility that teaches the body to use both carbs and fats in different situations. And like doing it in a cyclical manner also enables your body to maintain its resiliency, so to say, so it doesn't go into this very deprived state of being constantly.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, there's times where I'm doing very strict low carb ketosis. There's for months, and then there's times where I shift over to higher healthy carbohydrates for a time. So I call that seasonal variation. But what you're talking about with the intermittent fasting, and again, for new viewers, intermittent fasting just means Sim and I eat in a window, whether it be 4 hours, 6 hours, or one meal. That's intermittent fasting, where you're fasting maybe 15 hours, 20 hours, something every day. But to our point, people with thyroid issues, I think more women, they do better with variation. I find even sometimes 3 days of more eating or higher healthy carbohydrate eating, they seem to be. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah. Like your body has a rate limiting factor for restoring glycogen, so you can't really fully absorb all the glycogen in one sitting. It has to be done over the course of several hours, and or several days, for example. So that's why a single carbohydrate meal may not be as effective as doing it over several meals.
Yeah, no, exactly that way. Throwing in certain days of the week, especially like you said, for these more hormone, perimenopause, adrenal issues, or thyroid issues, absolutely works. The problem with it, Sim, though, is that just like anything else, someone moves to a vegan diet, they feel great. So now they're always on a vegan diet, right? Someone moves to a paleo diet, they feel great. Now they're always on a paleo diet, meaning they're getting too much protein too long, or the vegan person's getting too much autophagy too long, right? So we kind of stick to where we are. No different with the fasting, intermittent fasting. People do it and then they realize, oh my gosh, this is working finally. So then they shift to even less, right? Less meals, one meal, and they're able to do it, because they're getting more used to it, metabolically flexible. But so they end up eating less and less and less and less, and it leads to destruction. Do you find that it's hard to get people oftentimes to do the feast days? I have to tell people the feast days are as important as the fast days. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. Like, well, I myself, I'm also guilty of it every once in a while. Like, it's fasting. If once you get used to it, it's so comfortable, and you enjoy the fasted state, the mental clarity, the feeling of bliss.
Right?
So you just want to do it, but at the same time, I have to kind of remind myself again, that you have to break it up every once in a while.
Yeah, I'm as guilty as you are. I honestly, you get to a point where it's easier for me just to go about my busy day without eating. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I literally oftentimes have to eat. Now I may not have that this over the holidays, but this is something that's when I get busy during my work week. But when you have time off, it's a little bit easier to remind yourself to eat. Okay, so let's bring it to your expertise here. Working out, we have. I don't care if you're the house mom or the workout enthusiast. This works for you. Right. So I really want you to give them a really good schedule, those listening, of how to balance this with, intermittent fasting, some feast days, right. And resistive workouts, right. Because if you put all these together, there's magic here, right. And yet so few are putting it all together. So give them an example of how to put your workouts in, how to put your feast days in, and how to put your intermittent fasting in.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I want to back up a little bit of why would you want to do resistance training. So, the aspect of resistance training, the main goal of that, or the main effect, is that it promotes muscle growth and also promotes bone density and just general functionality.
Okay,
so
back up right there, Siim. I'm the sick person watching this. I don't want muscle growth. I'm the woman who's like, that's the last thing I want. But you and I, that means something else. It means healthy people need muscle growth, right? Even if you want to stay skinny and healthy, you need muscle, right? So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, building muscle isn't about bodybuilding and going to the stage in bikinis. It's about actually creating this lean muscle tissue that is functional, and it's just making you more healthier. So muscle as an organ, also as a tissue, is very healthy for improving your glucose tolerance, increases insulin sensitivity. It just improves even like your cognitive functioning, as well as just anti-aging. So muscle is very critical for slowing down the aging process. So as you get older, your muscle mass is going to inevitably start to deteriorate. And that also becomes like it's also going to become like an increasingly more problem as you get older. So the less muscle you have, the faster you're going to age, and the faster you age, the less muscle you're going to have. So it's a vicious cycle in a sense.
So now you have everyone's attention. We all need good quality muscle. So let's put the program together.
True. So you do it with, the best form of doing it is with weights. And that is just shown over the course of decades that some form of weightlifting at the gym with weights, or like free weights or kettlebells or something else, that's the most effective way of doing it. But also like
Tim, what about all the cardio and the aerobics classes and the bikes and all that stuff? You're saying it's better than that?
Well, yeah, like the kind of cardio exercise, it's not going to stimulate muscle growth because it targets another completely energy system in the body, which is aerobics. So you're not going to build any muscle with cardio. You're only going to burn calories. But the difference between resistance training and cardio workouts is that the cardio workouts only promote endurance and they burn calories, whereas the resistance training exercise stimulates muscle growth, which is going to speed up your metabolism. It's also going to enhance your bone density and also improves your hormonal profile. So it's a much kind of more effective way for losing fat as well as slowing down the aging process.
And I just read a study. I'm going to keep your train of thought here, but I'll just interject this. They're doing DNA methylation tests, which is really a very accurate way of looking at like how old you are, really how old you are at the cellular level, and even your internal organs. they're finding that people who do more cardio training actually have the worst scores. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a fine line, and I'm not against cardio. Listen, I was a cyclist, you know, I actually love it. Right. But the resistive training, to your point, is far better for anti-aging. It's far better if you're sick. It does better for your hormones. Too much of the other is very easy, especially if you're already not adapting to stress. Too much of the cardio could create more of an oxidative stress. But go ahead.
Definitely, yeah. And I myself work out with my own body weight. Like I do calisthenics on most days, but I also go to the gym like 2 times a week, where I do like actual weights and heavier loads. So when you look at the research, then generally like 2 to 3 times a week of resistance training seems to be the minimum, and seems to be like the bare minimum for the optimal dose. But like you can also do it more frequently. But most people, let's say, who are just exercising for their health and anti-aging, then they don't really want to do any more than that either. So which is fine. You can just go to the gym, work out 3 times a week, and generally it's better to target like full body compound movements that target multiple joints, and they also kind of stimulate the entire body, so they're more effective in terms of the actual response that you get from the exercise. So you can do like, the biceps curl is also like almost like the cardio workout of the resistance training. Instead of doing the biceps curl or the triceps push up, you would want to focus more on like the bench press or the barbell row, because with the bench press you're also training your shoulders, your chest, a little bit of your lats, your back, and it's kind of strengthens the entire upper body in one movement. Whereas with the biceps curl, you're only training the biceps and the forearm and so on. So you're going to have to just spend more time doing it, and it's going to be less effective. So that's why full body kind of multi-joint compound lifts, the general like powerlifting movements like the bench press, the squat, the deadlift, and the barbell row, those are kind of the big 4 movements that I think everyone should incorporate in some shape or form. And they're also going to mimic like the functional movements that you do in your everyday life. Like if you teach yourself how to deadlift correctly, then you're also going to teach yourself how to lift up a bookcase from the floor better, and you're not going to pull a muscle or something.
So do you have any examples of some of those that you put together in your website, or where would you point our people to be like, yeah, I want one of Siim's like workouts, and get some ideas there?
Yeah, like I do actually have a book, Metabolic Autophagy, that talks about how you combine both intermittent fasting with resistance training. So it's going to teach you how do you balance mTOR with autophagy, and how do you do it with both the fasting and the training.
Great. Yeah, no, exactly. And people want to know, right? People want to, be like, okay, just show me what to do. But I agree with you. If you're looking for health and longevity, even 2 days a week of resistive training can be really amazing, right? In 3, that number is what I do. 2 or 3 days. And I do other outdoor activities, in and around that. But the resistive training, that's pretty much exactly what I do. Okay, so then recommend. Okay, so if we're doing some of that resistive training, now here's a question that I always get. Okay, so we know that we need protein to recover as well, but we know this, folks listening. So this mTOR pathway, which is this anabolic pathway, muscle builders or bodybuilders, if you will, they exaggerate these couple things to make more muscle and be an mTOR. Increase protein, increase calories, or even increase carbohydrates. So those will stimulate the mTOR pathway, right? The autophagy pathway is decrease calories or fasting, right? And decrease protein. So we have these pathways that we've been talking about that are opposite. Okay, so recovery from workout, how much protein? I mean, this is always the debate, right? And again, let's talk about health. The bodybuilders, they want massive amounts of protein. For our viewers and listeners, we want the optimal health balance. So, when do I ingest it? Do I ingest more on my workout days? Do I ingest less on it? Kind of give us a guideline with the protein.
Yeah, definitely. You said it right, that protein is very important for muscle growth, and it's critical for longevity as well. So if you're not under eating protein, you're going on a low protein diet, then you may actually end up losing muscle mass, which is going to actually accelerate your aging process, which is the opposite that you want. So you don't definitely, I don't think a low protein diet is a good idea for longevity. and too much of it isn't good either for the reason that you mentioned. But if you look at the research, then they've found that the maximum amount of, or the optimal amount of protein for muscle growth that maximizes muscle growth is around 0.8 grams per pound of lean body mass up to 1.2 grams per pound of lean body mass. So that's the upper limit that you wouldn't see like any increasing effect going beyond that. And generally that's the amount that is recommended for people who are like very physically active. They work out, 3 to 5 times a week or something. But for the general population who just wants to be healthy, I would say that it's slightly less. Maybe it can be at minimum, I would still recommend like 0.6 grams per pound of lean body mass and upward to like 0.8, somewhere
Yeah,
from
so
there.
give us an example for a 125-pound person and a 150-pound person. Probably
Yeah.
easier for 150.
For example, if a person is 120 pounds or 130 pounds, then at minimum I would say that 100 grams of protein per day is a good idea, and upward like 120 grams upward. Like you don't need to go beyond 1 gram per pound of body weight. And for example, if someone is 150 pounds, then the minimum for them is like 125 grams and upward to 150 grams or something like that. Because if you look at the RDA,
Yeah,
the RDA,
on the lower scale of things, it would be actually lower. That was kind of around that 0.8 number there, wasn't it?
yeah, that's true. That's true. If a person would aim for 0.6, then I would say maybe like 100 grams or something again.
For a 150-pound person, it's around 100 grams. Yeah, I think
true.
that's right. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but
No,
I would say that.
0.8. You're right. 0.75, right? To divide in half. If it's 0.5, 150-pound person would be 75 grams of protein. Would be 0.5. So a little more would be maybe 80, 90.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I just want people to know how we're calculating that.
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't recommend going less than that, especially if you're
No,
doing some form of intermittent fasting, because
absolutely.
the idea that mTOR accelerates aging, it's also coming from the perspective of eating 6 meals a day. So that's why bodybuilders eat 6 times a day, because
Yes.
mTOR also has a limiting factor, so to say. You can't overstimulate mTOR in one sitting up to a certain threshold, and you can't even if you eat, let's say, 100 grams of protein in one sitting or 30 grams of protein in one sitting, the mTOR stimulation from that meal is still the same.
Yeah.
Because the body, it's not going to overstimulate mTOR, because it can only absorb a certain amount of protein in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing some form of intermittent fasting, then you don't really have to worry about the protein that much, because your eating frequency is smaller. So you're stimulating mTOR even in a smaller time frame, so you have less problems. You only would have to worry about it if you're eating like the standard American diet, with frequent snacks and frequent meals where you're keeping mTOR and insulin elevated all the time. But with fasting, that's kind of avoided. You're kind of protecting yourself against it.
Yeah, so I just want to repeat what you said. So if you're an intermittent faster who is doing resistive training, fact is you probably have a greater risk of getting under protein.
Yeah.
Because again, remember, protein is needed. And, so we want protein to stimulate mTOR, because mTOR is why you're working out. mTOR is needed to make the muscle stronger, right? So again, Siim's point, I think, is really well taken. I think today we have a lot of our viewers who are risking too little protein because they're eating a lot of plant-based, perhaps. It's a little harder to get the amount of protein that you're talking about. So You're better off when you are eating, making sure you're getting that amount, right? So again, just looking at those numbers, staying around, that 0.7, 0.8, I guess is, kind of a healthy range there, right? So just do the math.
It's also important to emphasize the quality of that protein and the composition of that protein. So you mentioned plant-based proteins. They are generally less mTOR stimulating than animal protein, because animal protein contains more of these anabolic amino acids, like the branched-chain amino acids and leucine especially. So leucine is the key factor for stimulating mTOR. So you can even achieve a higher mTOR response with less protein if the leucine content is higher. And generally animal protein, especially like eggs or meat, they have more leucine than plant protein. So yeah, you don't let's say with fasting, you have also less to worry about when it comes to animal protein, in terms of if you're worried about mTOR or methionine or something.
Well, and I think the other point that you said, I think is so well taken too, is if you are fasting, intermittent fasting, your risk of eating too much protein becomes much less, right?
Yeah.
You know, to your point, when you're eating 6 meals a day, you could actually, you know, have the same amount of protein as someone intermittent fasting and have actually, you know, more problems stimulating mTOR, right? So you have a lot of plant-based people who are eating many meals a day, who at the end of the day could actually run into more aging problems than someone, you know, eating 1 or 2 meals a day. So I think that was a really good
you
point.
know, you said like plant-based people can also experience higher rates of mTOR if they're eating all the time, because glucose and the sugar is also stimulating mTOR, and
Stimulates mTOR.
insulin also elevates mTOR. So even if you're eating like a no animal protein diet, but you're doing it very frequently, then you're still not avoiding the constant stimulation of mTOR and accelerated aging.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, look, I'm not against a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet for short periods of time. So, you know what I mean? I mean, that's kind of Siim and I's point, is like, you know, the problem is that people tend to do these things too long. I'm not against massive mTOR stimulation for short periods of time. But I think with the intermittent fasting, I think the protein conversation is a really important one. You know, I really don't worry about my protein in a meal, because I do intermittent fast. I don't worry. People always go, well, how much protein do you get? And it's like, look, when I work out, I make sure I eat a normal amount of protein, you know, in my diet. If you looked at my amount of protein, you know, it's probably, you know, at least 100 to 120 grams of protein at the end of my day. And I get that in 1 or 2 meals even, you know, and typically I get it in 2 meals. Many days, probably the days I do 1 meal, I'm getting less. But on the other days, I'm getting more. And on my feast days where I really eat a lot, I'm probably getting far more. I hope I am. I mean, I think I've figured it out to where I'm getting 150, 200 grams on some of those days purposely. So again, what we're talking about is doing this feast famine, you know, high protein. And by the way, Siim, one of the things I do even with my, you know, people who are looking to regain their health is instead of just doing high carbohydrate days, I have them do high protein days, because I am so concerned about their protein for their recovery. And arguably protein has more to do with their recovery than the carbohydrates oftentimes, right? So I like to do high protein days, which stimulates mTOR. I don't care if you get there, you can get there through carbohydrates, you can get there through calories, you can get there through obviously, you know, protein. So protein, calories, carbs, all of it will get you there. But I think for sick people, I love doing these high protein days.
Yeah, that's true. Like protein is very valuable, and even overfeeding on protein doesn't mean that you're wasting it away, because let's say protein can be absorbed quite over the course of several hours. So even if you are eating, or let's say you're exceeding your body's protein requirements in a meal, then your body is going to just slow down the digestion of that protein, and it's still going to stay in your system for several hours afterwards. So your body is going to prolong the anabolic response from that, and you're still absorbing it, so you're not really wasting it away. So, and it's very useful, especially if you're fasting and having like this higher pool of amino acids to pull from.
So we spoke a little bit to the person on this side of the autophagy side. Now, what about the the people out there that really want to put on muscle, right? So, you know, what about the intermittent fasting? Is it better to put muscle on intermittent fasting, or the old days of eating 5, 6 meals a day? So which way actually is going to help me hormonally put muscle on?
Right. Well, you know, the problem with the bodybuilding advice of eating 6 meals a day is that that advice comes from people who are taking like anabolic steroids. So their hormonal environment is already more prone to muscle growth, and they're kind of geared towards taking more advantage of that higher eating frequency. But let's say natural people who are just wanting to building muscle, then for them it's not that important to have that frequent meals. Of course, eating more often would help the muscle building process, but it's not detrimental for them to skip meals either. Like let's say the average person can still eat, let's say, 2 meals a day and be very successful at building muscle, as long as the calories and the protein content of that meals is sufficient. And arguably, you would still see a beneficial result in terms of the improved hormonal profile and improved body composition. So you can use, I like to see fasting or intermittent fasting, where you fast for like 16 hours and eat your food within 8 hours. That's a good kind of lean bulking style of dieting, where you're still eating enough, but you're also able to maintain relative leanness without getting fat. So if you're trying to really push the envelope, then maybe going towards eating 3 meals a day with the span of maybe 14 hours or something. But you don't need to really go beyond that. Like, you don't need to eat from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed to
Yeah.
build muscle.
Yeah, no, and arguably that's when you run into trouble with too much mTOR stimulation. So now some of the bodybuilders are eating in a window, realizing they get this hormone benefit for growth when they are doing fasting. However, they're pushing a lot of calories in the eating window. Maybe they're eating 3 times a day, but they're eating a lot of calories in the eating window. Does that work? Have you tried that?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you can still eat plenty of calories, even if it's in a small eating window, and build muscle with it. So, sometimes people just have a hard time of achieving that, because
That's me.
especially if they're eating like a whole foods diet, then it's very hard to gain weight on eating carrots, sweet potatoes, and chicken breast or something. So in that case, they can safely just increase the calorie density of their meals. Like, they don't have to eat bok choy and lettuce or something like that. They can go for like the fattier pieces of steak, maybe add some sweet potatoes, maybe add some fruit, some nuts or something that just have higher calories, and help them to achieve like a calorie surplus that way.
Yeah, exactly. So you're saying stick to your fat and protein in the eating window, because you're right. I mean, basically we're getting the autophagy from the fasting. Let's say we go 18 hours. Now we're trying to eat all these calories to gain muscle in the window. You're simply not hungry half the time, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to eat another meal, right? So, but if you really bring the quality of protein and fats in, you can pull it off. Because again, in the eating window is the mTOR stimulation. That means we either have to increase calories, protein, or carbs. So one or the other, or all of them, to really get that going. So anyways,
one trick that's also that stimulates appetite is also combining carbs with the protein, and that can also result in a higher anabolic response. So if you combine carbohydrates with protein, then you're also going to raise mTOR and insulin slightly higher, and therefore, if that can also make you more hungrier in some aspects, and also makes it easier for you to kind of overcome this palate fatigue that you may experience by eating in a smaller window.
Well, great advice. And bodybuilders have been doing that for years. Carbohydrates and protein even helps deliver the amino acids into the cell better, for recovery. Okay, let's talk about this as a question we always get. What about meal timing around your workout? Meaning the old days, it was like I would run home from the gym, if not bring protein with me, to make sure I consume protein 20 minutes after my workout, right? Now hormonally, we know there's some differences that we've discovered along the way for that. But talk about the meal timing around the workouts, because that's probably one of the biggest questions I get.
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends a lot on how you've been fasting either before or around the workout. So if you're coming from a fasted workout, then it is slightly more important to get the nutrients faster into your system and start the recovery process than it is if you were to coming from like a fed workout. So if you eat before a workout, then you can safely fast for several hours after the workout, because you're still using the nutrients that you got from the first meal. But if you're coming from a fasted workout, that can be somewhat more catabolic on your system, and you've broken down your muscles during the workout. And if you continue to fast afterwards, then that can lead to like just additional muscle loss, which is not ideal. So in that case, I would suggest maybe trying to eat like an hour or two after the workout if you've been fasting.
That's what I do. I try to eat, I try to just, around, you still get that growth hormone rise. So if you exercise on a fasted state, you're getting that growth hormone rise, this, you know, this sensitivity to the hormones. I try to ride that out for an hour or two after, you know, and then eat. But, you know, the debate is this, you know, and my friend Ben Greenfield, you know, we've had the conversation, and I find nobody really knows the answer, and probably because there's never been a really good study. But, you know, when is that optimal time to eat that first meal after you work out in a fasted state? You know, nobody seems to actually know the answer. And you and I kind of landed in the same place,
Right.
you know, that I like to just kind of, you know, give that growth hormone a little bit of time, but how much time, I don't know.
I think, yeah, like an hour or two is a good amount, because some of the beneficial adaptations you experience from the workout require the rise of cortisol and require the rise of growth hormone. So if you suppress cortisol immediately after working out by, you know, taking a protein shake or something, then you may not see the optimal results. So you need some of that stress to kick in and allow it to do its work.
Well, and then also, I mean, it's testosterone. The moment you start eating, your testosterone starts to come out, right? So, I mean, there's a time for both. Again, it's what that ride the hormonal optimization ride, you know, eat and start providing the, you know, the protein needed to recover. So I get, you know, we kind of land in the same place, but I mean, maybe someone will come along and say, you know, a different time later. Maybe it's different for everybody a little bit. I don't know.
Depends on the, I think, it depends on the person.
Yeah. Someone who's, you know, we got ourselves, excuse me, very fat adapted. So our bodies, you know, really go into that state, growth hormone state, rise in testosterone state after a workout, but maybe other people, perhaps not. I don't know.
Yeah, it's much easier for your body to deal with fasting if you are fat adapted and in ketosis. So you're going to experience less muscle catabolism, and you're also going to experience less hunger. So probably with a keto diet, or if you're fat adapted, then you can kind of ride away for longer, and you'll have like less negative side effects. Whereas somsomeone who is a sugar burner, then for them the fasting is just going to cause more damage, and they may need to repair it more often.
This is a hard question to ask guys like us, because every day is a little bit different. You know, the question is, okay, what's your average day look like with your workouts, your meals? You know, we almost have to go, okay, well, on a feast day, as I call them, it looks like this. On a fasting day, it looks like this. So try to answer that question as best you can. I know we vary our routines, but you know, what does your workout routines look like with your diet?
Yeah. Well, I would say, like 5 days of the week, I'm doing 1 meal a day, and with workouts. And on those days, I fast probably about 20 hours or something, and I eat my food within 3 hours or somewhere along the lines of that. Sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's longer, but yeah, generally I fast throughout the entire day. I consume only like coffee or tea, and then in the afternoon, I'm going to have like a resistance training workout with calisthenics or weights. The only caveat or the only difference that I do is that I actually consume like a small amount of protein during the workout in the form of a protein shake. So the idea is that because I'm only eating once a day, I'm still in need of some amino acids in order to protect myself against the catabolism that I would experience during a fasted workout. So I consume like a small protein shake, which is like 100 calories during the workout. And that is also going to...
And what time is that workout? Your workout later in the day?
It's in the afternoon, like around 4 p.m.
That way you're getting that pure fast, because if you did the shake, you're going to break your autophagy.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're getting that over there. So yeah, so then technically you're kind of eating in a window.
4 hours or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I do. Most of my eating days are within 4 hours, and then once I eat, then I eat. Right? I mean, I may eat, you know, just whatever.
Yeah, it's not like this one massive meal. It's more like a feast over the course of several hours. Like you have a meal, you wait a little bit, and you continue eating, because it is somewhat difficult to stuff yourself with all of your daily calories. So if you extend the window, then it's gonna be somewhat easier.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do, and I witnessed that when I visited a tribe in Africa. When they started eating, they just ate. Right. And like you said, it's not like that they sat down to one meal. They kind of had a very festive time of eating, and it was, not just necessarily the one big meal. Of course, I'll eat even up to the big meal. It's like I just eat a little bit, then I'll eat maybe a big meal. But I do. I have a 3-4 hour eating window where, you know, it's not like I sit in my kitchen and eat that whole time, but I start the eating process. I go do something else. I eat a little more. I go do something else. Then I eat my dinner, you know, so I'm eating in there. So, okay. So your workouts are a little later, you know, and again, you kind of start that, you know, what about just taking, this is easy for people. And oftentimes this is what I do when I have them, but I'll take some amino acids when I work out or, you know, during that workout, you know, just to kind of, you know, feed the body right there.
Yeah, like if that's the same principle. Like if you were to take those amino acids in the morning, then that would still stop the fasting.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
It would stop the autophagy. Yeah, so you
Right.
would only get away with it if you take it like during the workout and later in the day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why you push it out, so you can actually do that. You know, you push your workout. You know, but most people I would say they like to work out in the morning. Then you and I wouldn't like to do, if I do work out early in the morning, I don't want to do that because I don't want to break my fasting state. Or I just make that a feast day. I make that a day where I do, you know, just take in way more calories and protein throughout the whole day. So days I work out early, I kind of try to feast on those days more. So I don't know if you ever do that, but
yeah, you can still, like, if you work out in the morning, then you know, break a fast like in the noon time or something, and have like 2 meals, 3 meals. So you should never kind of confine yourself into a certain specific way of eating. Like, you should always maintain the flexibility and be able to adapt to different situations.
Or another idea, Sim, is that if you're saying, hey, the only time I can work out is 8 a.m., 7 a.m., who knows? You shift your eating window completely, right? So you stop eating, say, at 3 in the afternoon, and your fast is longer, you know what I'm saying? So you can move your eating window for whatever works for your workouts, you know, or your, you know, or your job. I mean, who knows? I mean, but yeah, so I mean, you don't have to do this eating window in the afternoon. You could make a shift.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and arguably, like, some research says that early time restricted eating is better than later time restricted eating. But actually, if you compare them, then there's not going to be any difference as long as the hours are kind of matched. Like, the magic comes from the suppression of the eating window, whether that be earlier or later. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you know, I've played around with it, you know, and I've had conversations with Jason Fung about this and others, you know, where well, you know, for people who are metabolically challenged, diabetes or whatnot, it seems that earlier eating does better for them, you know, and you know, maybe, but clinically, I don't know. I tend to just let people say, where does it fit? Because the fact is I think you're right. The magic's in the fast, no matter what. And there's maybe a little benefit of where your eating window is. I agree with eating too close to bed is destructive for everybody. It disrupts your deep sleep. Exactly. So, but giving yourself, you know, 4 hours before bed, that's what I do, you know, seems to, you know, taper down that any negative that would come eating late. You know, but here's the thing about eating too early. My argument is this, that we have the dawn effect, meaning in the morning, your body, cortisol goes up, that wakes us up, right? The cortisol rise, and then glucose follows cortisol. So then we push glucose out into the system. So if you test your glucose in the morning, it should always be a little bit higher. And that's why we don't have appetite, right? A healthy person doesn't have appetite because you're releasing glucose and you're going about burning your glucose. So for me, it's like the body almost doesn't want to eat in the morning. What's your thoughts on that? Because there's debate both sides of this.
Yeah, I definitely, I agree with you in the sense that you shouldn't feel hungry in the morning if you have like a healthy, flexible metabolism, because you're coming from an overnight fast, you're in semi ketosis already, and that should give you like enough energy to start the day and suppress your appetite. And it's definitely not like ideal to be eating food if you have elevated cortisol and elevated blood sugar. So you know, cortisol itself is deemed to be bad, but you actually need that cortisol, you know, to kickstart the circadian rhythm and to start the day and mobilize the fat. So at that point, it's a good idea to have that cortisol elevated, and maybe like wait. I would suggest, if you prefer eating early in the morning, then still wait like a few hours after waking up to allow the cortisol to kind of lower down.
My morning eaters, that's what I tell them. You know, wait and let that cortisol come down, let that glucose come down, and then you know, and typically your body will tell you, you know, if you get hungry. Well, Sim, this has been a great conversation. I think we really hashed it out on all the topics, the amount of protein, when to work out, how to eat, how to vary your diet. And you and I didn't know each other before you interviewed me on your social media platform. But we really resonate around this topic. So I'm glad there's a few of us out there.
Yeah, I'm also glad to talk with you, and definitely likewise, spreading the good message with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ashley will connect your media pages where people can watch you and get some workout advice and all that great stuff. So, Sim, thank you so much for being on Cellular Healing TV.
Yeah, it was good talking with you.
Hey, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Cyto Detox. Look, podcasts cost money. There's a lot of production going around this, but we are grateful to have Cyto Detox as one of the sponsors. It's so easy for me to talk about the product because myself and my family use it constantly as we practice what I preach. For over 15 years, I've talked about and taught doctors and the public about cellular detox. And I'll tell you, Cyto was a breakthrough. Cyto was a breakthrough for us. And it's changed so many lives. So we're grateful that they sponsor Cellular Healing TV. It makes sense, doesn't it? They should.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing Cyto Detox product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit detoxoffer.com. Again, that's detoxoffer.com. Well, that's it for this week. The materials and content within this podcast are intended as general information only and are not to be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you would like to purchase some of the supplements mentioned on this show, please visit the site as seen on CHTV.com and use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. Again, that's as seen on CHTV.com. Use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. And as always, thanks for listening.